So how exactly do you pay for a war that just doesn't end? That's the huge question Russia's had to figure out. What started out as a plan to just use some emergency savings for a quick conflict, well, that's completely morphed into a total permanent restructuring of their entire national economy. Let's really dig into how they're pulling this off. Okay, so let's start with this number, 7.2%. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That's the slice of Russia's entire economic output, its GDP, that's projected to go just to military and security spending in 2025. To put that in perspective for you, most NATO countries are trying and often struggling just to hit the 2% mark. So yeah, 7.2 is a massive number. And that right there brings us to the core question we're tackling today. How on earth is this possible? Seriously, where is all this money coming from? Is this just a desperate short-term scramble, or have they actually built a system that's designed to last? We're going to take apart the machine they've built piece by piece to find out. All right, so to really get the solution, you first have to understand the problem they were facing. And the initial plan? Well, it was pretty simple, really. But it was based on one gigantic miscalculation, that this war was going to be short and, more importantly, cheap. So the idea was, hey, let's just dip into our massive oil savings. This is money held in what's called the National Welfare Fund. You can basically think of it as the country's emergency piggy bank. But here's the thing. The war just kept dragging on, and that rainy day fund started to get seriously depleted. By 2023, you're looking at a full-blown budget crisis. The piggy bank was basically being smashed to bits, and they needed a whole new plan, and they needed it fast. And just look at this graph. What's so striking here is that sheer vertical climb. I mean, wow. In 2021, before all this kicked off, military spending was sitting around $66 billion. Fast forward to 2023, and it's already at $109 billion. And the projection for 2025, we're talking well over $170 billion. You can't pay for that kind of explosion by raiding your savings account. You have to totally re-engineer the entire financial system. So yeah, that National Welfare Fund, it became a stopgap measure, a financial bridge, really. In 2023 and 2024, the government just yanked out a massive 4.2 trillion rubles to patch up the budget. But look, this was never a long-term solution. It was a desperate move to buy themselves some time. We're talking about 18, maybe 24 months tops, just enough time to try and build a whole new permanent funding machine from scratch. Okay, so how do they actually build this new machine? The clock was ticking, right? What the Kremlin did was launch this very systematic three-phase plan to completely overhaul its tax system. And this wasn't just about, finding a bit more money. No, this was about fundamentally restructuring the entire economy to make war its new, permanent, central purpose. And this right here just lays out the strategy perfectly. It's actually quite clever, in a way. Step 1, in 2023, you test the political waters. Slap a one-off tax on the big corporations and see what happens. Step 2, in 2025, when you realize they didn't really fight back, you make it permanent with some major tax hikes. And then, for the final step in 2026, you broaden the burden. You go after everyone else, mass consumption, small businesses, the whole shebang. It's a very calculated step-by-step squeeze. That political test back in 2023 was pretty shrewd. The government didn't call it a tax. No. They called it a voluntary contribution, and then they offered a deal. Hey, if you pay early, we'll cut your rate in half, from 10 down to 5. And guess what? Of course, pretty much everyone paid early. And that move was brilliant because it did two things at once. First, it minimized any political backlash because, hey, it's voluntary, right? And second, and this is crucial, it got billions of rubles into the budget immediately, right when they needed it the most. Then we get to phase 2. The permanent engine. You have to understand, for 20 years, a key part of Putin's whole social contract with the people was the super simple, low 13% flat income tax. The unspoken deal was basically political loyalty in exchange for the government staying out of your wallet. Well, in 2025, that foundational pillar is being completely shattered. It's getting replaced by this new 5-tier progressive system that climbs all the way up to 22%. This is a fundamental shift in the relationship between the state and its citizens' money. But here's the thing, and this is the crucial point. The new income tax on regular people, that got all the headlines. But it's not the real cash cow here. Not even close. Look at this chart. It only brings in about 20% of the new cash. The real workhorse, the boring part of this whole reform, is the hike in the corporate tax rate. That jump from 20 to 25%, that one move alone hauls in over 1.6 trillion rubles. That's over 60% of the entire package. It's the real engine. And they're not done yet. The machine keeps going. Phase 3, which is planned for 2026, is all about expanding the net. This time, it targets the little guys, your corner stores, the local beauty salons. They're doing it by slashing the revenue level, where you're exempt from paying VAT, the value-added tax. And this is a huge deal because it forces millions of small businesses that were previously protected into this really complicated and expensive tax system. It's a crystal clear choice. They're prioritizing the war economy by sacrificing the regular consumer economy. Okay, but think about it. A tax machine this aggressive can't just work in a vacuum. If you crank up taxes that high, what's the first thing money tries to do? It tries to run away. So to make this all work, the state had to build 2 other critical pillars to basically lock the money in and deal with all the side effects. Pillar number 1 is the central bank. You've got the finance ministry over here just pumping trillions and trillions of rubles into the economy to pay for the war, right? And that causes huge inflation. So the central bank has to come in and just slam on the economic brakes. And they've done it with a series of really brutal interest rate hikes, jacking the rate all the way from 7.5% up to a peak of 21%. It's like the state is at war with itself. One foot is just flooring the gas pedal on spending, while the other foot is stomping on the monetary brake as hard as it possibly can. And this brings us to the second pillar, and honestly, this might be the most important piece of the whole puzzle. How do you hike corporate taxes to 25% and stop companies from just packing up and moving their money somewhere else? It's simple, really. You lock all the financial exits. Presidential decrees have put in these super strict capital controls that make it almost impossible for any serious amount of money to leave Russia. And what does that do? It creates a completely trapped audience of taxpayers. Businesses can't run, so they've got no other choice. They have to pay. And there's yet another tap for cash they've turned on: the big state-owned companies. Since the government is the main shareholder, it's forcing these profitable giants, like the state bank Sberbank, to pay out absolutely record-breaking dividends. Just look at how Sberbank's payments have skyrocketed. At this point, it's not really a dividend, is it? It's basically a parallel tax system, a direct pipeline of cash flowing from a state company straight into the war chest. So, okay. After all of this radical re-engineering of the economy, the new taxes, the locked financial doors, these parallel revenue streams, we're left with the big questions. Did it actually work? And if it did, what is the ultimate price they're paying for this success? And the answer, from a purely financial point of view, is a clear, unambiguous yes. It worked. The massive budget crisis that so many Western analysts were predicting for Russia, it's been solved. That temporary, totally unsustainable model of just draining the piggy bank has been replaced. It's been replaced with a permanent, domestically funded war machine that looks sustainable for, well, the medium term at least. And look, the math doesn't lie. You've got the 2025 tax hikes bringing in 2.6 trillion rubles. Then the 2026 changes for small businesses, that's another 1.3 trillion. Add in the dividends from state companies, about 1.4 trillion, and when you add it all up, the government has literally created a brand new permanent revenue stream of over 5 trillion rubles every single year. That is more than enough to fund the war at its current, very expensive level. But, and this is a huge but, this fiscal success has come at an absolutely enormous cost. What they've done is brutally and very efficiently transfer wealth away from the private, productive parts of the economy and shove it directly into the military budget. So the whole non-military part of the economy is just getting strangled by sky-high interest rates and a huge new tax burden. As a result, economic growth is expected to just plummet, from over 4% down to maybe 1%. In essence, Russia has mortgaged its entire long-term economic future to pay for this war today. And that really leaves us with a final, pretty sobering thought. Russia has done it. They've successfully built a financially sustainable machine to fund a permanent war. The engine is running, and it works. But by making the sustainability of that war machine their number one priority, they've completely sacrificed the sustainability of their own country's economic future. So the question really isn't, can they afford the war anymore? The real question is, what kind of country is going to be left standing when the bill for all of this finally comes due?